Alrighty, so the Victorian government wants to know where you go and what you do. Now, a lot of us know this already. Of course, it was revealed by the Herald Sun last year that Insights Victoria, which is funded to the tune of $4.4 million, has actually been collecting the social media habits of Victorian residents, mostly in relation to the perceptions and thoughts and feelings that we, the people of Victoria, have in relation to the government's response to COVID-19, or more specifically, keeping a close eye on those who express dissent. That's right. We are turning into a surveillance state in Victoria, and what I'm about to show you is really just adding to that equation of surveillance and the government seeking to be involved in areas of our lives where they're not welcome, and seeking to centrally plan our lives and our neighbourhoods in, once again, ways and manners where they're not welcome, that I say serve in their interests and in the interests of a select few corporations. All right, so anyway, what are we talking about here? Why am I making this post? The Victorian government wants to know where you go and what you do. Alrighty, so one of my supporters reached out to me the other day, and she received a couple of letters in the mail, basically a proposition from a private corporation acting on behalf of the Department of Transport for her to participate in effectively a survey that required her to carry on her a privately issued GPS device so that her movements, where she goes, what she does, could be recorded, and that data would effectively be sent to the Victorian government under the guise of crafting policy that can help with things like urbanisation, development, and planning. Now, of course, me being who I am, I did not take this on face value, and I wanted to really look into this exercise a little bit further, and I wanted to find out who are the stakeholders in this private corporation. Could there be a conflict of interest? Could there be an alternate reason as to why the government is seeking to acquire this very personal data? And I'm going to share with you what I found. I actually sent a letter to the Minister for Transport here in Victoria, just asking a few questions that I think the public deserve to know. Now, this is a bloke by the name of Ben Carroll. Here are the questions I asked him. All right, number one, what is the dollar value of the contract between the Vic government and IPSOS? 2, will the survey data potentially be used for establishing 20-minute cities? 3, can you guarantee that Victoria will not introduce Oxford Council-style traffic filters, something similar, or restrictions in order to control where and when and how Victorians travel? 4, can you guarantee that the decision to commission IPSOS is free from conflict of interest? 5, does the Victorian state government have any intention to restrict Victorians' movements in order to combat climate change? There he is there, Ben Carroll. I think he's got a lot of questions to answer there, Minister for Transport from Dan Andrews' cabinet. So feel free to reach out to him if you think that he should be answering some questions. Now, I took it upon myself to have a closer look at the organisation, the private organisation that has been contracted to conduct this survey and to manage this data on behalf of the Victorian government. So I'm going to show you what I found. All right, so name of the company is IPSOS, a data collection survey company based in France. It's the third largest market and public opinion company in the world, with a market value of 2.74 billion euros, which equates to 4.2 billion Australian dollars. We look at some notable shareholders here on the company, and we see some names that you might be familiar with, such as JP Morgan Asset Management, the Vanguard Group, and BlackRock Fund Advisors. It's also important to point out that IPSOS over the years has received multiple millions of dollars in grants from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That's right. So just a little bit of a background on who they are and what they do. Now, I think it's a very important question that many of you are raising, whether or not this type of data collection is in relation to the government's proposed 20-minute neighbourhoods. I was calling it 20-minute cities. I meant 20-minute neighbourhoods, which is basically a vision of the Victorian state government to have residents more or less in a position whereby they don't need to travel more than 20 minutes from their home in order to access everything they need in terms of food, employment, and recreational activities. A big driving motivation behind the establishment of these 20-minute neighbourhoods is that supposedly this will be a strategy for combating climate change. Now, don't give the Victorian government too much credit for coming up with the 20-minute neighbourhoods. This, of course, is a topic that has been long cooked up in the basement of the World Economic Forum. So if you look around the world, you'll see lots of governments, lots of local councils seeking to establish either a 15/20-minute city, 15/20-minute neighbourhood, etc. Now, before I show you some interesting information from a local council in the UK, I'm going to first show you the video produced by the Victorian state government that supposedly is explaining the benefits of rolling out and developing these so-called 20-minute neighbourhoods. Take a look.
To improve livability, the Victorian government is working to create a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods. It's all about creating walkable neighbourhoods where people can live locally. Places where communities can access most of their daily needs within a 20-minute return walk from home. These places should have diverse housing options and access to safe cycling routes and local public transport, local health facilities, parks, shops and other local infrastructure. We are already working with local government, communities and industry to deliver projects and are committed to building a livable city of 20-minute neighbourhoods. To find out more, visit the Plan Melbourne website.
All right, so there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's the Victorian state government's explanation for what it is. And, you know, they're going to be very coy about this. Of course, any type of so-called initiative that will ultimately dictate how people live will be sold to the public in terms of benefits. Well, it's going to save you money. It's going to reduce your carbon footprint. You're going to be able to make more money because you don't have to travel too far, more time with your friends and family. Now, whenever the government bends over backwards to convince you that they are acting in your best interests, your response should always be, well, what other interests are involved? Are there corporate interests involved? Are we seeing a further merger of corporatism and state? So let me just show you some extra documents right here. Now, the private corporation that has been contracted to collect this data, IPSOS, I would like to bring to your attention that they were commissioned by the Oxford Council in the UK back in 2019 in order to conduct what they referred to as a citizens' assembly on climate change. All right. And what we've seen from that same council, that's the Oxfordshire Council over there in the UK, is the rolling out of what they refer to as traffic filters. All right. So what exactly are these traffic filters? Well, effectively, the local government over there in Oxford, they are restricting where residents can travel, when they can travel, and effectively restricting what people can do. And should residents break those rules, they will receive hefty fines in the mail. Now, the purported reason for the implementation for these so-called traffic filters is to combat climate change. Alrighty, now I think that it's very telling that this local government commissioned IPSOS a few years ago to conduct some special operations, and that we've seen the rolling out of these traffic filters. So, and considering that the Victorian state government has commissioned the same corporation, IPSOS, and is collecting data that is most definitely in relation to local communities, local travel, where people go and what they do, it's only fair and reasonable that we are very, very suspicious of what the government is doing. Now, there's people out there that will say, well, you're crazy. The government would never impose mandates in terms of when and where we can travel and what we could do. The government would never do that. Well, hey, I say to those people, the government said that a lot of things would not become compulsory or mandated in this country. Who here remembers this?
We do not have a mandatory vaccination policy in this country. We do not have that. We are not proposing to have that. That is not changing.
Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, I guess my advice to the public is do not participate in these exercises. Right now, the government's saying, well, it's voluntary. If you want to take this GPS and report where you go and what you do, it's up to you. Who says it will not become mandatory in the future? Who says that we won't have these so-called traffic signals like in Oxford in the UK? Who says there won't be restrictions on where we can go, when we can go, how far we can drive, and what we can do? What we need to recognize is that the government is not the solution to our problems. Problems can only be solved by we the people, looking after ourselves, looking after our families, promoting a system of decentralization, whereas the government is only interested in central planning, making contracts with these private corporations, pursuing the fusion of corporatism and state at the expense of our freedom, at the expense of our interests, and in favor of the interests of those who hold large amounts of shares in these companies. Call it out for what it is, ladies and gentlemen. It is insider trading. It is corruption. It's reminiscent of how the mafia acted during the days of Prohibition, except unfortunately these folks in government are able to get away with it for now until we the people stand up. And guys, stand up we must do. Thank you for watching. To make sure you never miss an episode, sign up at mcjreport.com. Catch you on the next one.